Wuthering Waves features one of the best combat systems in modern gaming. It is smooth, fast-paced, and layered with meaningful depth in both team building and enemy interaction, from outro skills to attribute damage to sonata sets, dual DPS dynamics and more. Experimenting with different compositions is genuinely enjoyable. Importantly, players are rarely forced into chasing meta units in order to clear endgame content. In this video, I want to focus on a specific aspect of Wuthering Waves' combat design, which is the implementation of negative status effects. I will outline the current issues, discuss my concerns for future patches, and propose potential solutions. Version 2.1 introduced Phoebe, the first character built around the Spectral Frazzle debuff. In theory, adding negative status effects should deepen the game's mechanics. However, in practice, these debuffs have instead created overly rigid team-building requirements, primarily because newly released debuff-based characters tend to be tied to one another. Examples include Sunny depending on Phoebe, or Cardathia depending on Chakotay. This reveals the fundamental issue. Premium support should make a team stronger and feel better to play, not create a massive damage and mechanical difference that feels mandatory. Take Cardathia as an example. She requires 5 stacks of arrow erosion to reach her maximum liberation damage. At S0, she can only apply 2 stacks on her own. To reach the full 5 stacks, players must either obtain her S3 or pair her with Chakotay, who provides both arrow erosion stacks, arrow erosion and arrow damage bonus. The result is a dramatic damage gap between a Cardathia with Chakotay and one without. This demonstrates how negative status effects, instead of enhancing flexibility, are making certain characters significantly more restrictive. Not every player who likes Cardathia will necessarily enjoy using Chakotay, and they shouldn't have to. Developers have listened to community feedback and have already reworked Havoc Bane into a more flexible, stackable defense threat on top of its original damage over time effect. This is a step in the right direction, but it doesn't address the core issue. Future characters may still fall into the same pattern of requiring a dedicated enabler to function. One key mechanic I intentionally withheld earlier is Arrow Rover's ability to convert other negative status effects into arrow erosion. This is a game changer, as newly released characters like Shiza and Bowling apply their own debuffs, and because Bowling is a 4-star unit with flexible utility, such as the accessible Electro Flare stacks and 15% team-wide damage amplification outro skill, she has immense potential to be a strong pick for enabling Cardathia without Chakotay. This is a perfect example of how debuff conversion can free characters from rigid team-building constraints. Let's get into the first suggestion, which is that the addition of 3 characters for each element who can convert debuffs into their own element's negative status would solve most team-building restrictions. With the right design, these converters could create unique strategies. For example, Spectral Rover can apply Spectral Frazzle, but she also has a time stop mechanic that can be paired with a character that has a similar playstyle as Jian to handle mobile enemies, and Bowling offering flexible amplification across multiple teams as well. These changes would simultaneously make the game more player-friendly and expand its strategic depth. This conversion system primarily helps characters that apply and interact with debuffs, but what about the rest of the roster? Phoebe and Chakotay's outro skills grant a massive 100% damage boost to their respective debuffs. However, both characters have low personal damage output and are designed to function strictly as enablers, locking their teams into hypercarry setups. Most hybrid units such as Changli, Yuno, and Rochia provide 20% elemental and 25% attribute damage buffs, with some exceptions, but they also contribute significantly more personal damage. To make characters synergize better with debuff systems, all characters should be given minor, suboptimal, but still meaningful ways to apply debuffs. Let's use Sunny as an example. More temporarily ignoring Spectral Rover, Sunny relies heavily on Blaze, which she cannot generate efficiently without Phoebe. But if Yuno could apply even a small amount of arrow erosion, for example 10 stacks through her ultimate, a converter could transform these into Spectral Frazzle. This would allow Sunny to gain some Blaze, 50% heavy attack damage amplification from Yuno for a Liberation form, while maintaining clear superiority for Phoebe, who provides 19 stacks of Spectral Frazzle and a full 100% debuff amplification. This allows debuff-centered characters to have a chance in dual DPS setups without eliminating the value of premium supports. This is still balanced as Cardathia's Liberation damage scaling limits to 5 stacks of arrow erosion, and she does not benefit from heavy attack damage bonus. Some might ask, why give all characters a minor debuff application if converters already exist? The reason lies in how outro buffs work. Consider Cardathia once again, who requires arrow erosion stacks to maximize her liberation damage. A character like Yuno can stack arrow erosion, but her outro skill buffs heavy attack damage, not liberation damage, making the pairing inefficient. We can also consider converting Phoebe's Spectral Frazzle stacks into arrow erosion for Cardathia, but this is simply inefficient as well as Phoebe doesn't buff arrow damage in any capacity. If Changli could apply a small number of Fusion Burst stacks and buff Liberation damage, A converter like Arrow Rover could transform those stacks into Arrow Erosion. This would allow Cartafia to function without requiring her dedicated support, as she gains all required stacks as well as 25% liberation damage bonus, while still making a Chacona her optimal choice, effectively maintaining the power balance of the game. Negative status effects are an exciting mechanic with huge potential, but in the current form, they act more as a restrictive system rather than a meaningful layer of depth. While the developers have shown willingness to address community concerns, as shown with the Havoc-Bane rework, the underlying design issues remain. I hope the ideas presented in this video offer a constructive path forward. If you have any additional suggestions or thoughts on these proposals, feel free to share them in the comments. Thanks for watching.